Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, hope you're doing well. Okay, today we're going to do a review of the Brooks Hyperion Tempo after 400 kilometers of running mileage in them. Quick disclaimer, I'm not sponsored by Brooks or anyone in any kind of way. I'm just reviewing these shoes because I feel like it. I also bought these shoes online with my own money, so yeah. So let's turn back the clock to December last year. At the time I only had one shoe in my rotation. It was the Brooks Glycerin 20, which I've been using for all my runs since I bought it in August 2022. Anyways, in December, I was looking for like a faster shoe to run in. I already did like a 6-week 5k training cycle in my Brooks Glycerin 20s, and I was kind of curious to see what's out there, to see what's faster to wear. Honestly, at this point, I didn't know much about shoes in general still, but I really enjoyed the Brooks Glycerin 20 at the time, so I went online to see what kind of like fast shoes that Brooks had in their lineup. At the time, they had the Hyperion Elite and the Tempo. I wasn't too keen on the Elite because it seemed to be geared towards racing, and I was looking for something that I can use for like workouts and like something more durable, something cheaper, something I can use quite often for my workouts basically. So I looked up some reviews online. Seems like the general consensus was it was like a durable, lightweight, stable trainer. I do have slightly wide feet, so I was kind of worried about getting these kind of shoes. They only come in the standard width, but yeah, just decided to go for it anyway. So I went online, looked for the cheapest one. I found one at like Pace Athletic online. It was like 189 bucks AUD. The RRP for this is like 270 bucks AUD, so you know 189 bucks is about 25% off. But I feel like it was still quite pricey for like a shoe that came out in February 2020 and one that I purchased in December 2022, which is like almost 3 years later after its release. Fortunately, my pair was like manufactured in like March 2022, not like 2020, so it wasn't too bad, I guess. So when I first got it and I put it on, I noticed immediately how light it was. In my size of like 9.5 US, it's about like 215 grams I think, and compare that to like the Brooks Glycerin 20, which I have in the 9.5 US and 2.8 width, that's like 295 grams I think. Compared to that, the Tempo was like at least 25% lighter. It also felt quite narrow, but this is to be expected because you know my feet is like slightly wide. Maybe I should have gone half a size up to like size 10 US. The upper was very comfy and breathable. Brooks advertises this stretch woven upper as like a performance fit, I guess, and I think they're spot on with it. The upper was super thin, but like it was very comfy at the same time, and when I wore it, it just sort of disappeared in my foot. The heel was kind of padded and sort of stiff, but not too stiff like the Glycerins. The tongue is like super thin and like super short as well. It did slide down my foot a bit by the end of my runs, but it didn't really affect my running that much. However, the laces are kind of like flat and stretchy. Yeah, it was kind of hard to tie the shoes properly without feeling like it loosened up later on throughout the run. If you do use the runner's lip or the heel lock, the laces do feel kind of short, but yeah, you gotta play around the lacing a bit to find out what works for you. So yeah, overall pretty decent lockdown, and just standing around and walking with it when I first got it, the DNA Flash midsole foam felt quite firm, and when I took it out for a run, it definitely did not feel soft or bouncy in any kind of way. It was more firm, stable, and you know, when I picked up the pace, quite responsive. By design, it does have like a slight rocket to it in the forefoot area you see here. Although when I wore it, I didn't really feel it much, like compared to the Brooks Glycerins, for example. I felt that a lot. It also felt quite low to the ground, but that's probably because I've been wearing my Brooks Glycerin so much, and that's like a really high stack kind of shoe. It also had a very neutral, stable, flat feel. There's pretty much no stability elements in the shoe. And the outsole has some firm rubber. There's heaps in the forefoot and heaps in the heel. Nothing in like the midfoot, I guess. The fact that there's so much outsole rubber is probably why it feels so stable. I believe the outsole is made of carbon rubber, which means it's very durable, but it can be quite slippery in wet conditions. The grip is more than fine in like dry surfaces. Ever since I got the shoe, I pretty much used it for speed workouts, including intervals like 400, 800, 1 kilometer repeats, tempo, threshold workouts like 2 by 15 minute at threshold pace, some fartleks as well, some hill repeats, nothing too steep though, maybe like 3 to 5% incline for like 150 meters, bunch of park runs, and also some 5 to 10k time trials. And for the most part, I was rotating with my Brooks Glycerin 20, which I was using as my daily trainer for like recovery, aerobic, long runs. More recently, I've been using it for like my medium long runs, which is anything between 18 to 24 kilometers at like a somewhat steady pace. It performed very well for the short speedy runs, those like intervals I was talking about. I noticed how smooth the transitions were. I think for me personally, it worked well with high cadence or turnover, not with like longer or stronger strides. For longer speedy runs, it still did fairly well, but was kind of tiring later throughout the runs. For example, I had like the sessions where I had like 2 by 50 minute at threshold pace, and my legs felt kind of beat up by the second rep. Maybe it's because I get tired and like my form breaks down. It felt like I had to do a lot of the work myself. which isn't a bad thing, but like I feel like I couldn't sustain like fast paces for too long. The recovery jogs between my intervals felt okay in these kind of shoes. I feel like you can sort of go recovery pace to these, but like it wouldn't be my first choice. It's not really comfortable going slow in these kind of shoes. For longer steady runs, like those medium long runs, 18 to 24 Ks at somewhat aerobic and steady pace, for me they did very well. They felt light and responsive the whole way, which is sort of what I'm looking for when I'm doing those long runs. But I guess some people might not enjoy the lack of like padding or like cushioning when doing long runs, I guess. I pretty much only ran on pavement and footpaths with this shoe. Never really took it off-road, so didn't really try on trails or grass, for example. It felt pretty solid going uphill in these shoes because it's pretty light and has like decent grip and responds pretty well to a high turnover. But going downhill, not so much because yeah, the midsole's kind of firm and it felt somewhat harsh on the legs. So slow jog downhill is kind of fine, but like I wouldn't really be happy running downhill faster, I guess. I also ran with it in wet weather a few times as well. It can be quite slippery. I mean, I never really slid, but I never had much confidence either. It doesn't really soak water that much, so I guess that's pretty good. And when it does get slightly soaked, it doesn't really get heavy either, so that's also a plus, I guess. Let's go through the condition of the shoe after like 400 kilometers of usage. The upper has slightly stretched for me a bit over time. That's probably because I have slightly wide feet. It might not really stretch if you guys have like narrow feet. The sticker overlay is kind of peeled a bit, I guess. Again, that's probably because I have slightly wide feet. But yeah, otherwise this upper is still in like excellent condition. The midsole feels almost the same as when I first got it. The DNA Flash foam isn't really bouncy or springy by today's standards, but it is known to be quite stable and durable. So it'll probably feel the same for like a longer while. Part of me thinks the foam has stiffened up over time, but maybe it's because I've been using the Spring Freeze too much and I've been getting used to that kind of springy foam. I wouldn't say it aged badly at all. It never really had crazy bounce or like springiness in the first place, so I don't feel like anything's missing much after like 400 kilometers of running in it. The outsole is slightly worn up but in excellent condition. If I had to put like a number on it, it's probably like at 85 to 90% condition, I guess. I've gone pretty hard on these shoes and they held up pretty well. The grip is still pretty solid in my opinion, but I haven't tried on wet surfaces in recent times. Personally, I feel like I could still use this for like over 1,000 kilometers, maybe even more since I'm lighter now than I was when I first got these shoes. Pretty much carbon rubber, it's sort of what I expect. Like it usually wears up pretty evenly for me and would last me ages. I pretty much got a solid 300 kilometers in it before I upgraded to the Saucony Endorphin Speed Freeze in March this year. Afterwards, the tempo kind of got overshadowed by it, and yeah, I feel kind of bad for not taking out my runs that much anymore. At this point, my tempo is kind of semi-retired in my shoe rotation. I still plan to use it here and there because I guess firstly, it's still in really good condition. I don't feel like there's any reason for me to like throw it out or retire it anytime soon. I'm also pretty happy to rotate with my New Balance FuelCell Rebel V3s for my medium long runs just to get like different feel throughout the weekend. If I ever like run on the track sometime, I might even give this a try as well. I feel like these would perform pretty well on the track. Okay, let's go through some of the pros and cons of this shoe. In terms of pros, it's very fast, it's lightweight and quite responsive, very comfortable upper, very stable feeling, smooth transitions, and I guess as a whole, it's very durable too. In terms of the cons, the laces could be a bit better. I feel like they should just give us longer laces or like oval, cotton-based laces, something that's a bit more standard, I guess. The outsole isn't very grippy on wet surfaces, but the upside of that is it's very durable. I feel like it doesn't really have a good energy return for going the distance fast, mostly because the rocker isn't very prominent, and yeah, this foam isn't really forgiving for like going fast, far. It's more than fine for cruising at long distances, I guess. Do I still recommend it nowadays? Probably not. I feel like there's a bunch of different options out there today, and with all the crazy tech and development, the premium tempo feels kind of outdated on paper. We now have shoes with crazy, bouncy, springy, PEBA-based foams with like high stack and even like more aggressive rocker geometries to help you keep moving forward, and even plates inside the shoe, whether it's like nylon, TPU, carbon, or whatever, for even more responsiveness. Even then, those kind of like crazy shoes might not work for everyone. So something with like a traditional feel like the Tempos may work for some people. I personally enjoyed the feel of it, and I still do, but the Tempos wouldn't be my first choice anymore. Some alternatives to consider include the Saucony Endorphin Speed Freeze, the Brooks Hyperion Max. That's very similar to Tempo, but I feel like it has a slightly higher stack and a bit more rocker. Maybe the Adidas Takumi Sen 8 or 9, the New Balance FuelCell Rebel V3s, maybe the Hoka Mach 5, and like even the Asics Magic Speed 2 or 3. I'm sure there's a bunch more out there, but yeah, those are kind of, I feel like, the fast performance trainers out there. All of them will perform and feel differently in some way, but I feel like they're all designed to be kind of fast. The Tempos were my first speed shoe in my rotation. I still respect it for what it's done for me, and it's holding up pretty well these days. However, it is sort of semi-retired in my current shoe rotation ever since I upgraded to the Speed Freeze. Compared to what's on the market these days in terms of up-tempo, speedy shoes, the Tempos might feel a bit lackluster in comparison, but I personally still enjoy it for what it is. It's a very lightweight, durable, stable, traditional, or classic feeling performance trainer. For those of you who currently have the tempos in your rotation, or for those of you who've like worn it in the past, let me know your experience down in the comment below. For those of you who are considering it, definitely shop around if you can and try other kinds of like speedy, up-tempo performance trainer shoes out there for comparison and see what works for you, and let me know how that goes as well. That's pretty much all to say for now. Hopefully this video has been helpful for you guys. Thanks for watching and have a nice day. Bye.